Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
Sometimes I hear parents comforting other parents about their teenagers' behavior with phrases like, oh, they're just ruled by their hormones. Don't worry, he'll come to his senses. Or don't worry, they always come back. Or you just have to get through this time and then they come back to you. And there's this idea that we are going to stay exactly the same and that our teenagers have gone someplace, someplace crazy, someplace we don't like. And we just have to hold steady and they'll come back to us. They'll return to us. And on some levels, I get it because they were missing that sweet self, that snuggly, wanted to see you all the time self that they used to be. And we hear people say, once they have their independence, that they'll come back to you. And that idea that we'll get back, there's a real sense of loss right now as teenagers are pulling away and feeling, like they want to be more independent. And your very breathing bothers them sometimes. All of a sudden you're chewing too loud and your clothes are embarrassing and all of that. And there's this idea that we can just hold the course, grit our teeth, get through this time, and they will return to us. And I can see the comfort in that because you feel like that helps you handle the loss that you're feeling right now. But I don't actually think that that's the most useful way to think about this time because in some ways, we don't want that former self back, right? When they were 10 and they were so excited to see us and our opinions mattered so much to them. We don't want those 10-year-olds back. We want fully formed, functioning, happy, independent, successful, thriving, connected adults. That's what we want. And in order to get there, we have to grow through this stage. And I actually think it makes a lot more sense for us to grow through this stage along with them. And then not only are they prepared to be happy and successful adults, but we're actually prepared for them to have their own lives. In many ways, this phase helps us prepare to be empty nesters, or even if this is just your first, to be an empty nester of that child. This time is preparing us as well. And so I don't think it's that useful to think about us staying the same and them coming back to us. I think it's a lot more useful for us to all think about growing through this stage together. And in order to do that, there is a skill that I don't hear people talking about that I think is it's crucial and it's underutilized. And I call that skill unlearning. So unlearning is really the skill of detaching yourself from, we have learned this model of how we operate as parents. When our kids are younger, we're controlling, what they eat because we're the ones that are driving to the store and buying all the groceries. And we're in a way controlling who their friends are because we're driving them to play dates and we're saying, oh, you can't play that day because you have this other thing you have to do. We're in charge of so much of their lives. But as they get older and they get more control of their lives, we have to unlearn that idea of control. Okay, we have to loosen our mental model of who we are as parents in order for a new mental model to emerge. And unlearning can be applied to all kinds of areas, not just parenting. This is actually, I used to use this concept when I coached business clients as well. One example that I can think of that's not business related either is I'm taking Spanish right now. And in order to effectively learn Spanish, I have to unlearn some of the rules of English grammar, right? Because Spanish grammar is different than English grammar. Okay. And so I have to loosen my attachment to all languages working the same in order to embrace the idea that Spanish nouns have genders. And until I loosen my attachment to that idea, like I was really frustrated that I had to learn the gender of all the nouns in order to learn, which article to use and which adjectives to use. Like I was really frustrated as long as I was resisting the idea that Spanish nouns have a gender. Okay. And that highlights a really important distinction between unlearning and forgetting. Unlearning is different than forgetting because I'm not forgetting the rules of English grammar. I'm just loosening my attachment to the mental model of English grammar. I'm not forgetting it altogether. It's like that with parenting too. We're not trying to forget who they were or who we were as parents when they were little. Of course, we don't want to do that. Like we want to remember all of those amazing snuggly times when they couldn't wait to see us and they begged for more bedtime stories. Okay, we can still take comfort and joy and pleasure in those memories, while at the same time loosening our mental model that that's how things are going to be right now. Okay, because as long as you're holding on to that mental model, then every time you get snubbed for a friend, every time they have their phone and they ignore a text, like you're going to feel hurt. Because the hurt is coming from your attachment to the idea that your child wanting to spend time with you means that they love you, or means that they think you're a good mom, or any of those mental models, okay? That attachment to the idea of them picking their friends over spending time with you, that's where the hurt is coming from. And as long as you hold on to that model, you're going to feel hurt. Okay. Another example, a lot of my clients want to unlearn the idea that they are responsible for their child's happiness. Okay. There's so much chaos in the teen years. There's so much drama, right? Because your child is handling all of their emotions and they're friends with, a group of people that are all trying to figure out their own emotions and who they are. And they're part of families that are dealing with their own emotions. And it can just be a roller coaster ride of emotions. My daughter, I've said before on this podcast, she said once, some days I just have to set aside extra time to be angsty. And as long as I'm attached to the mental model that it's my job to make her happy, then every time any one of my kids or my husband or anyone in my family is unhappy, then it's my job. Like I can't be happier than the least happy member of my family, which means that the more kids you have, the more relationships you have, the smaller your slice of happiness becomes. And so what a lot of my parent clients need to do is to unlearn that mental model that they are responsible for their kids being happy, that if their kids have a problem, that it's their job to solve it, okay? They first need to unlearn that model so that they can start to learn the model where they're transferring control of their kids' happiness to their kids, where they're transferring control of solving their own problems to their kids. And that helps prepare their kids. It's a good thing. It's a benefit to their kids for their kids to start taking responsibility for their own lives. And it's a benefit for my clients because they start to get to feel happy more of the time. And it sounds like a small thing and it sounds like it's obvious, but when you're going through unlearning an old way of thinking, it really takes quite a bit of deliberate practice. Okay, you have to choose. You have to first notice your existing model, which most of these models are like software just running in the background. We don't even know that we have them. We just know that we're vaguely unhappy. We know something's wrong. We don't know what it is. And we think it's our children's behavior. And so we're trying to manage our children's behavior. But what's really going on is that we've all outgrown this old model, this old way of being as a family. And we have to unlearn, we have to unearth and notice that old model before we can shift into the new, more purposeful model. I kind of liken it with some clients as like if you've ever worn a pair of shoes that don't fit, that's what these old models can feel like. So you have to just first notice it before you can take off those shoes and put on something that fits how you are now. Okay, another mental model that a lot of clients need to unlearn is the idea of who their kids are. So sometimes I'll see with high schoolers, like maybe the child was super into a sport their whole life, and you thought they were going to play college hockey. And then all of a sudden, their junior year of high school, they're like, nope, I'm done. I don't want to play hockey anymore. And the parents sometimes are more attached to that model of who their child is than their child is. And their child's ready to shift and become someone else and to try new activities their last couple of years of high school. And the parents really struggle to give that up. Like they think of the tens of thousands of dollars they spent on hockey, and they struggle to give up that old mental model. And that creates problems. We have to first unlearn our ideas that we know everything about our kids. And it seems like we should because we're all together all the time. But people change over time. And if we're not consciously noticing those changes, sometimes they go unnoticed. Another mental model that a lot of parents struggle with, and I struggled with myself, is the idea that time spent together equals how close we are as a family. And so as my kids got older and they didn't want to spend time together, their lives got more complicated and more their own. You know, they had jobs, they had sports, they had, my son played in a couple bands. You know, they had all of these activities that didn't have anything to do with me. Then I got kind of needy and desperate about time spent together. And things like even my son didn't want to go on family vacations with us a couple of years in high school. And it was so painful for me because I equated time spent together with how close we were as a family. And it really was until I understood that I had that mental model and started to loosen my attachment to it, that I was able to truly enjoy the time that we did spend together. Okay. I didn't waste that time that we did spend together bemoaning the fact that we never spent time together, which is more common than you'd think. Like, I'm definitely not the only parent that does that. And not only did I enjoy the time that we did spend together, but then I was able to embrace all the other ways that we were still super close as a family, that we still had like almost our own secret language and our own inside jokes as a family, and start enjoying our text conversations more. And that definitely served me as my kids left the house, because we had this strong foundation that we were close as a family, no matter how much time we spent or didn't spend together. Okay, we developed like a shorthand that made use of the time that we did have. But that was only possible because I loosened up that mental model of, you know, time spent together equals closeness. And there are dozens of other examples that I could give of different mental models that parents are operating under that don't serve them. Another one that I commonly see is kids who used to tell their parents everything, who are now not confiding in their parents. And their parents have this mental model that if the kids tell them everything, then they're safe. They're able to keep their kids safe. Or maybe it's an issue of closeness. They feel really close to their kids because their kids tell them everything. And then when their kids stop telling them everything, they feel both it triggers fear because they feel like they can't keep their kids safe. There might be something going on that the parent would want to get involved in that they're not going to know about now. And they also feel that distance. They feel like they're not as close as they used to be. And so then the parents try to pull the kids closer. And of course, the closer the parents try to pull the kids, the more the kids fight for their independence, which makes parents try to pull even closer. And, you know, it just becomes a really difficult cycle. And what best serves the parents is to first unlearn, to disconnect, to loosen their attachment to the mental model that their kids tell them everything and that it's necessary for their kids to tell them everything. Okay. And from there, once that's loosened, then they have a much better sense of how to develop like a new model for how communication is going to be, a new model that respects the teenager's desire for privacy and starts to transition you towards a more adult relationship with your kids. And if you think about your own parents, like you for sure don't tell your own parents everything that's going on. And that's the relationship that you're moving towards. And that healthy adult relationship with your kids, that starts now. And it starts with you starting to loosen your attachment to the way things used to be. So just to summarize how this kind of goes, because I want you to be able to put this concept into practice in your own life. The first step is to notice your own discomfort. Okay? Your own discomfort is your own frustration, your own feelings of loss or loneliness, or wishing that you could have your sweet angel back. Like that's a big red flag. That you have an old mental model going on that you need to loosen your attachment to. So the first step is to really become aware of what that mental model is. And then the second step is to accept that that model is supposed to change. That's why I love this age so much, because it's really that transition from childhood to adulthood. Things are supposed to change now, and they're supposed to change not just for your teenager, but for you as well. Because if you use this time wisely, you're setting the foundation for a more adult relationship with your kids, to have a healthy relationship down the road. And that down the road time is a lot longer than your together time. And so it's really important that you set that strong foundation now so that you have it when they leave the house. Okay, so step 2 is really to just accept that things are supposed to change. And that might involve a little bit of grieving the loss of how things were. Step 3 is to start to think about what new mental model might work for you. And like in the example that I gave about closeness not equaling time spent together. So my new mental model was just, that we're a close family, whether we're together or not, or we always find a way to stay connected. That's probably a more accurate description of what my new mental model is like Irwin's always find a way to stay connected. And then step 4 is to just practice that new model once you've unlearned the old model, then the next step, obviously, is to practice the new models, practice your new way of thinking. Anytime you notice that twinge of discomfort come up, that's your cue to practice your new model on purpose. And I think it's super cool that our brains can do this, right? I think it's super cool that we have the opportunity to become aware of our own thinking and to become aware of when it's not serving us, and then to choose on purpose new ways to think about things. I think our ability to learn is just the best. And putting this ability to work with our families is just I love it so much. So if you have any questions about this process, if you need help figuring out what your mental model is, don't hesitate to shoot me an email or go on my website and book one of those free consult calls. Okay, you can find that at allieirwin.com. There's a tab that says work with me, or you can always just shoot me an email at allieirwin.com and tell me what's going on, and we'll figure it out. I hope this was helpful. Have a wonderful week.